Friends, Romans, countrymen. Works. Smile. There's been a coup d'etat in the SNP. You're now looking at your new First Minister, or as I prefer to term myself, President for life. No need to bow, but if you wish to, it will be greatly appreciated for all those who are looking for careers, shall we say, in a future independent Scotland. Oops.
We need somebody up here to point to people and tell us exactly.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yep, somebody's here. That's good to hear. I'm very pleased to be here today with so many of our brilliant SNP activists and, I can now say, candidates for next year's Scottish Parliamentary election. So congratulations to every single person that's been selected as a candidate. I can also say a quick word about those who stood but were unsuccessful. They're absolutely vital to the democratic process of this party. What I'd like to see, and I know we're going to have, I've talked to some of our candidates already, is a coming together of all the different people that stood to make sure we all get behind the party for next year. That's the SNP at its best. And if you didn't win this time, there's always another time. So thank you for taking part to all the unsuccessful candidates in our democratic processes. I've had a little bit of a chance this morning to chat and catch up with many of the candidates stood behind me, even the one that dropped the glass just now. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that our members have selected an absolutely brilliant group of talented and diverse candidates for next year. We have a wealth of talent in the party, and a big chunk of it is stood behind me this morning. And each and every one of them bring something different, and they will do a fantastic job of taking forward a positive vision for Scotland's future. And can I just say to my colleagues on the NEC, when Mairi, Watt and myself proposed that we should do this in such a way that we guaranteed we had every single candidate in place at least a year before the election, for the first time ever, there was a lot of doubt expressed, but we managed to do that, and I think that speaks volumes about the way the party is now being handled. And I think a lot of that has to do with the person we'll hear from shortly, the First Minister. So a year ahead, we've got all our candidates selected. And all of us can be very proud to be standing for the SNP under the leadership of John Swinney. Since becoming SNP leader and First Minister, John has not only made clear his focus on the priorities for the people of Scotland, but he's delivered on that priority. Whether that's eradicating child poverty, growing the economy, improving our public services, or tackling the climate emergency. And unlike the other parties, for whom Scotland will always be an afterthought, we have a party leader who will always do what's best for Scotland and deliver what he says he will deliver. And of course, we have never and will never take anything for granted, but we can see, as people in Scotland have started to see and feel the positive impact of the SNP government in difficult circumstances, support for our party is rising again, and the people of Scotland can see that we will always put them first. And that's something that only the SNP can promise voters next year. And just before introducing the next speaker, I think, like many of you, I'll go straight from here to the by-election, and to encourage as many people as possible to go to the by-election. And if we needed another incentive, let's think about the absent colleague that we have today, who held that seat, won that seat and held that seat. Let's make sure we win that to keep it SNP for Christina. So just before we hear from the First Minister this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome one of my brilliant colleagues who was an incredible addition to our Holyrood team at the last election in 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mairi McAllan.
Thank you very much, Keith, and hello to everybody. It's so lovely to join you all here today and to do so alongside so many of my friends and colleagues in the SNP. It's been a little while since I saw some of you, because I recently had the joy and indeed the challenge of welcoming and being with my little boy, Sorley John, which has just been wonderful. He's 9 months old now, which isn't very old, although as a lot of new parents can attest, 9 months can seem like quite a long time when you've been awake for most of it. But being away from my day-to-day duties in government, it does bring you a sense of perspective. And I must say, for me, two things have principally stood out in that time. First is the perpetual disappointment of Labour. They have profoundly let people down. Whilst Keir Starmer and Labour were making promises in the election just prior to my maternity leave, they promised change, and among some of the first acts when new MPs went down to London was to vote to deprive Scots pensioners of a winter fuel allowance. And they have proceeded to balance the books on the backs of some of the most vulnerable people in our country, and they have completely thrown to the side commitments that they've made, including on tackling child poverty. Tackling child poverty is something which our First Minister has described as the moral compass of his government. So all they've really shown is that when it comes to Westminster, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and people deserve so much better. And that really brings me to the second of the two issues that have really struck me in my time away from Parliament and government. And that's namely our First Minister, John Swinney, and my colleagues in the SNP, who have essentially been the antidote to that failure and disappointment of the Labour Party. They have been determinedly focused on delivering the priorities of the people of Scotland. Whilst we are living in difficult times, with many pressures bearing down on our government, everyone in our party and each of the candidates here today, they can be proud next year to ask the public to vote for the SNP, a party that prioritises them, not political posturing, a party that delivers progress, not platitudes, and a party that offers hope, not hate. And so with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the individual who is going to lead us in that work. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the Leader of the SNP and First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mairi, for that very kind introduction. You are such a valued member of the SNP family, and it's been wonderful to hear how your own family is doing and coming along. And to my dear friend Keith, your SNP family are so full of love and admiration for you right now. I've been over in Hamilton a lot in the last few weeks to support our fantastic candidate, Katie Loudon, and I've lost count of how many people have spoken to me of Christina with such deep affection. Friends, there's no better tribute that we can pay to our dear colleague, Christina McAllan, than campaigning to honour her legacy, to win in her beloved Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, and fulfil her dream of an independent Scotland. Friends, it's hard to believe that a year has passed since I became Scotland's First Minister. A week may well be a long time in politics, but paradoxically, the last 52 weeks have flown by in no time at all. Every moment has been an absolute privilege to serve Scotland. When I joined the SNP as a teenager, it was in the midst of economic turmoil, a cost of living crisis and huge global uncertainty. But I looked around me, and I was convinced that Scotland had the talented people and the immense resources to face those obstacles head on. The world of 2025 feels very uncertain too, and times are really tough for a lot of people. But you know what? I'm not fazed by the challenges in front of us. What I believed back then, I am more convinced than ever. Scotland has what it takes to be a successful independent country. look back over my first 12 months as First Minister, when I think of all the truly inspirational people around Scotland I've been so lucky to meet, the entrepreneurs, the carers, the innovators, the problem solvers, the educators and the community activists, I know that there is nothing wrong with Scotland that cannot be fixed by what is right in Scotland. Today, we're here to discuss how we move forward as a nation. In exactly a year's time, people will be going to the polls in a crucial Scottish Parliament election. And friends, with your help, I intend to bring Scotland together. I want us to unite around a shared vision and a common purpose, a determination to build a Scotland where we can all feel at home, where no child is left behind and where everyone could fulfil their potential. We know that when the SNP does well, Scotland does well. So let's resolve today in 2026, the SNP are going to win for Scotland. I want to start today with a big thank you to all of you. Over the last few months, we've rolled up our sleeves and worked harder than ever for the country that we serve. Our MSPs, our MPs, our councillors and our fantastic activists and the tremendous group of candidates that we have now selected who are going to be our team for 2026, and many of them here with us today, all of us are putting our shoulder to the wheel. We've come together and we're getting back to what we do best, delivering for the people of Scotland. Thanks to all your hard work, the SNP is back on the front foot. So friends, let us build on that momentum. Let us redouble our efforts to work together each and every day to make Scotland the better country we know that Scotland can be. We're winning back the trust of the people of Scotland because we are showing them that we are truly focused on their priorities. People tell us they're worried about the cost of living, and we are listening. South of the border, Labour are charging people for university tuition and many other public services. The SNP are guaranteeing to keep them free in Scotland. That is the SNP delivering for Scotland. Pensioners are telling us that they're worried about how they'll heat their homes this winter, and the SNP are listening. Labour may not think that older people deserve support during a cost of living crisis, but we do. Pensioners were betrayed by Labour, but under the SNP, every single pensioner in Scotland will receive a winter fuel payment this year. That is the SNP delivering for Scotland. Friends, commuters tell us the cost of rail travel is still a real issue for them, and we are listening. In this cost of living crisis, people in Scotland rightly expect their government to step up. So we've looked again at the issue of rail fares, and the SNP are scrapping peak rail fares for good. That is the SNP delivering for Scotland. Friends, people are telling us they're struggling to access the NHS or get appointments with their GP, and we are listening. We're investing, we're rolling out new technology, and we're expanding specialist regional centres. Over the last year, there have been dramatic falls in some of the longest waits, as well as a 50% increase in surgical procedures such as hip and knee replacements. Just yesterday, I announced the delivery of an extra 100,000 appointments in GP surgeries and 150,000 additional appointments and procedures in our hospitals to reduce waiting times. That is the SNP delivering for Scotland. And friends, people tell us they want every child in Scotland to get the best start in life. and the SNP is listening. Under our watch, Scotland is the only part of the United Kingdom where child poverty is falling. Where other governments are stepping back, the SNP is stepping up. Our Scottish Child Payment is still unique in these islands. Labour have chosen not to replicate it. And while Labour refused to scrap the morally unjustifiable two-child cap, the SNP will step up once again. We will scrap this cap and keep thousands more children out of poverty. That is the SNP delivering for Scotland. Friends, we have more to do. The SNP is fully focused on the people's priorities. In a year's time, when the people of Scotland choose their next government, we will earn their trust by showing them a record of delivery. In that election, Labour will be standing on their record too. And don't worry, I'll make sure about that. Like every election, like everyone else, I was delighted to see the back of the Tories, and I felt more positive when Keir Starmer took office. I've done everything I can to work constructively with the new Labour government in the interests of Scotland. People in Scotland put their trust in Labour last year, but time and time again, Labour has let them down. Pensioners stripped of their winter fuel payment, households forced to pay higher energy bills, businesses slapped with Labour's job tax, families left with no end in sight to cruel Tory welfare policies, waspy women promised compensation but given nothing. Friends, over the last year, the SNP has been doing what we do best, standing up for Scotland. Labour have been doing what they do best as well, taking Scotland for granted. And in the election next year, be in no doubt, Labour will have to answer for their broken promises. Friends, for as long as Scotland is under Westminster control, people are entitled to expect that Westminster will give them the same focus as any other part of the United Kingdom. But here is what Labour deliver. They've bent over backwards to support 2 carbon capture sites in England, but failed to fund the Acorn project in Scotland. They're saving jobs at Scunthorpe while abandoning workers at Grangemouth. They're happy to take Scotland's energy wealth, but refusing to cut our energy bills. Labour or Tories, it's the same old story. For Westminster, Scotland is always an afterthought. For the SNP, Scotland will always come first. Friends, if you want to know what happens when governments don't deliver for the people, look no further than last week's local election results south of the border. An ill wind of change is blowing through UK politics, and after last week, it is no longer fanciful and deeply regrettable to suggest that Nigel Farage could be the Prime Minister in a few years' time. This should be a wake-up call for people across Scotland, but certainly not a surprise. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have opened the door to Farage because they have failed to stand up to him. Dancing to Farage's tune on immigration, too scared to admit that Brexit has been a disaster, alienating communities in England by maintaining Tory austerity cuts. That's what you get with Labour. At Westminster, Nigel Farage may not be in office, but he's very much in power. You don't beat populists by imitating them. You beat them by confronting them. We will never do any deals with Farage. Only the SNP will confront Farage and defeat Farage. It's often said that the past is a foreign country. Well, after last week, I think for people in Scotland, the future of the UK is increasingly unrecognisable. Now, more than ever, it falls on the SNP to offer a brighter future. I've believed for my whole life that the path to that brighter future for Scotland is reached by becoming an independent nation. And I've always known that we will become independent when a clear majority of people gets behind a common vision for our country's future. Our task, as the party that will guide Scotland to independence, is to create the conditions where that can happen. That means getting all of our ducks in a row. And friends, we're doing that. When I became SNP leader, I said we needed to come back together as a movement, and we have. I said that we needed to stay true to our values, and we are. I said that we needed to earn the right to be heard. And through our hard work, we're earning that right, because we are delivering on Scotland's priorities. And by delivering for people in the here and now, they're more open to receiving our message of hope for Scotland's future. Over the next 12 months, we must deliver our message as far and as wide as possible. Westminster has scarcely looked more distant from the people of Scotland and their everyday concerns. For years, Labour told people in Scotland that they didn't need independence. We just needed to get rid of the Tories and everything will change. No wonder so many people are feeling disaffected and alienated right now. The choice is to accept things as they are or to act differently. What surer way to tackle alienation than with the overwhelming sense of empowerment of becoming an independent nation which is ours to create here in Scotland? We can build a winning coalition for independence by showing people what that empowerment can lead to. The Scotland I want to build is an enterprising, outward-looking and compassionate Scotland which will flourish with the powers of independence. An enterprising nation which understands that the prosperity of our country rests on ensuring the prosperity of every single one of our citizens. An outward-looking nation where we give to the world everything we can offer, just as we seek from the world everything it can offer us. Where we take our rightful place at the top table of Europe, which looks at the global challenges of the age, such as the climate emergency, and asks not how can we avoid responsibility, but instead asks what can we do to help. And a compassionate nation which sees human rights, including LGBTQI+ rights, not as something to denigrate, but as the bedrock of a society where everyone feels safe and accepted. One which a society which doesn't balance the books on the backs of pensioners, the poor and disabled people, but values them as ourselves, our friends, our family, our neighbours, those we love, cherished members of our society. That is the Scotland we should aspire to, and that is the Scotland I want to create. All of us are here today because fundamentally we believe in something better. Even in these uncertain times, we know beyond any doubt that Scotland has what it takes to be a thriving, successful nation. Over the next 12 months, our ambition must be to unite as many people as possible behind our vision. We must reach people from all walks of life in every corner of Scotland. We must build a winning coalition that is as broad as it is high. Here today, I don't just want to win. I want us to shift the tectonic plates of Scottish politics and create a wave of hope that will overcome Westminster's wall of despair in our country today. Friends, we're back on the front foot. So let's take the next steps together. When Westminster lets Scotland down, let's lift Scotland up. When others seek to divide, let us unite. While others tell people in Scotland that they can't, let us show them how we can. This campaign for Scotland's future starts today. So let's get out there, let's win that better future for Scotland, let's make Scotland the country that we can be proud of. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you all. Okay, thanks. Right, thanks very much, everyone. We're now going to take some questions from the broadcasters. I'll speak to the print media just in a little while, but if I can ask for some quiet so that we can have the questions asked and for my answers as well, that would be much appreciated. So I'll come first of all to Colin Mackay of STV. Colin.
Thanks, First Minister. I have two questions for you. A year to people get to vote, but it's less than a week until all the MSPs vote on assisted dying. Can you tell us today how you plan to vote on that? But also, in terms of delivery, which has been your watchword today, GPs say that what you announced yesterday won't end the ATM rush for appointments. It won't deliver for patients.
Okay, on the first question, Colin, I said that I'd set out my view on assisted dying. I'll do that more than likely tomorrow, and I'll do that to all media outlets at the same time, so you'll hear what I've got to say tomorrow. And I stress that, you know, I've only got one vote, but I know there's a lot of interest in what I've got to say, so I'll communicate my view tomorrow. On the issue of access to GP services, I recognise the challenges that members of the public face. There's a number of things we're doing to try to address the issue. First of all, there's the announcement yesterday of 100,000 extra appointments to deal with high-risk conditions, which will help to provide preventative interventions in access to GP services. But there will also be the boosting of the Pharmacy First service, which is an important access point for people to gain healthcare advice, and also an increasing share of new NHS expenditure going to primary care. So, as a combination of all of those changes, which are all designed to boost the capacity of access to healthcare services, I think we can address the ATM rush, which I know causes such concern to people. And we'll continue to work, as we have been doing for some time with the GP community, to make sure that we strengthen the availability of GP services. And we'll work to make sure that people have that better access to services that they require. I'll come to now Glenn Campbell from BBC Scotland. Glenn.
Minister, if you are totally committed to reducing child poverty, why should higher earners continue to benefit from free prescriptions, free university tuition and now discounted rail fares?
We've got to, in any policy programme, you've got to strike a balance in the commitments that you bring forward. So, yes, people in higher earners will be benefiting from certain services that are available, but higher earners will also be paying more in contributions in taxation terms. So, you know, I think we've done the rational thing, which is basically to have an honest conversation with the public and say there are circumstances where those on higher earnings have got to be asked to contribute a bit more to public funds. That will provide a range of public services, some of which they will benefit from, such as, for example, peak rail fare cuts. but somebody will not benefit from, which would be, for example, the Scottish Child Payment. And that's part of what I would say is the social contract, which has been at the heart of the values of the SNP government, which is about inviting those who can make a contribution to make an appropriate contribution, of course within the context of most workers in Scotland paying less in taxation than they would if they lived in the rest of the United Kingdom. And that approach is in sharp contrast to the decisions the United Kingdom government has taken. Because what the UK government has done, instead of taking a course of action like that, they've clobbered business with employers' national insurance contribution increases, and we're now facing massive problems and challenges in social care provision and in businesses across the country are saying to me, they're terrified by the impact of the employers' national insurance contributions. So a different approach can be taken if you apply your values. And what people get from an SNP government is the values of an SNP government. Okay, can I come to James Cook from BBC Network? James.
Good morning, First Minister. What specifically should happen if there is a pro-independence majority in the Scottish Parliament after next year's elections? In other words, is a vote for the SNP a vote for independence?
Well, I think there should be... I've always believed that the question of independence can only be settled through a referendum on that question. So my view is that what should happen is that there should be a referendum on independence where people have the opportunity to exercise their view. That is the fair and democratic thing to do, and that's been denied to Scotland by the intransigence of the Westminster system. But what I'm determined to do is to make sure we get the significant SNP win that drives that agenda and enables us to have a referendum on independence.
But just to be clear, sorry, what's the bar? Is the bar, as you said in your speech, a clear majority of voters, or is the bar a pro-independence majority at Holyrood to trigger that referendum that you think should happen?
Well, I think there should be a democratic majority. If there is a democratic majority in the Scottish Parliament for there to be a referendum on the independence question, and that majority has been elected because people have put that commitment to the people of Scotland, that's what should happen. Okay, Kieran Andrews from ITV Border. Kieran?
Thanks, First Minister. You talked very forcefully about Nigel Farage there, but isn't the emergence of reform in Scotland quite helpful for the SNP, not just on the regional list, but in tight constituencies like Dumfriesshire and Galway and West Dumfries?
No, I can't see anything attractive or beneficial about the... about the prospect of Farage-style politics coming into the Scottish Parliament. I look at it, I look at what Farage, how he communicates, how he speaks about other people. I had the enormous privilege on Scotland's behalf to be in Rome for the funeral of His Holiness Pope Francis. And the whole message that came out of that visit for me, the whole communication that came to me from members of the public who said to me they were so pleased I was going there on Scotland's behalf, was a message of kindness. Nigel Farage is the antithesis of kindness to others. So I can't see anything desirable about it whatsoever. And I hope people vote SNP to stop Farage. Right, Gina Davidson from Global.
Thanks, First Minister. In an interview you gave earlier this morning, you seemed to swither between delivering over the next 12 months when it comes to the NHS and making progress. Which is it, and what does delivery actually look like for people? And can I also ask if you have a message for the Indian and Pakistani communities in Scotland who will have woken up to the news of what is taking place over there this morning?
Yeah, thanks, Gina. My focus is on delivery, Gina. That's why I brought the programme for government forward to make sure that I can get government as focused as I humanly can do for the remaining 12 months of this parliamentary session on delivering on the public's priorities. And you've heard me in the course of my speech today setting out my delivery priorities, and Parliament heard them in the programme for government yesterday. So it's an absolute relentless focus on delivery, and it's about improving access to healthcare services, and it's about reducing waiting times, and that will be what we focus upon. In relation to the situation involving India and Pakistan, I obviously have watched the events overnight, and I recognise those events will be causing enormous concern between India and Pakistan and Kashmir, but then also within our communities here in Scotland. And we've always prided ourselves on operating and supporting our communities to come together. So we'll be working to reassure and support the Indian and Pakistani communities in Scotland, and on the international stage, as I set out this morning, I would encourage calm and dialogue to resolve these issues. There is enough, more than enough conflict in the world without there being conflict in Kashmir, and I would want to encourage in that process. Now, the last broadcast question is from Logan Walker of Original 106. Logan.
Thanks, First Minister. Stephen Flynn is heading north of the border next year to seek a seat at Holyrood. Are you at all scared for your job?
In a word, no. I think, you know, like, just like all of my wonderful colleagues standing behind me today, and I look forward to, well, as many of them as possible, indeed all of them, to be elected to join me in the Scottish Parliament next year. Well, I've got to get myself elected there as well. So let's not ignore the people of Perthshire North who are going to have to be asked to vote for me once again. So Stephen is one of our team. Will make a great contribution to the Scottish Parliament, as will all of my colleagues, and I'll be delighted to start the parliamentary term as leader of the Scottish National Party and conclude the next parliamentary term as leader of the Scottish National Party and First Minister. So, thank you all very much for being here today. Thank you to our wonderful candidates. I'm so delighted. Can I just reiterate a point that Keith made earlier on? I'm really grateful to others who came forward to stand for selection. Unfortunately, we can only fill 73 places in our constituency selections. I would just encourage others to do all they can to support the party and thank them for their willingness to come forward. It's going to be a joy to fight the campaign over the next 12 months, and most importantly, to deliver for Scotland and set out the agenda for a bright future for our country. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to the print media later on. Thank you very much.